Oh, that to lim do dent. In Iowa. In Ando.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, da not so to choose in do dent tomatella. Samala, some the Tahi de la Shuata. Then the Tatalo, Jinjulank, Lotark, Junju, Provak Junju, the Trent, and this and go to Yare. Then the Delanyam Yokna in Tamala, Tahi de la to ye chase. Shuata, and then I thought Talo, Nayam Tekan, Zamalan, Yonzola Pekanga, she won't say, then to say you're. Take a so Namju Namji, Jumchu, Tasajatil and Zomne, so to me do. Tita Juni, Tenderson, Talo Soya. So Jenny say, na, Tata Juni, not on the Yam Zom City, Mambo, Yam Yotoyala, Pintoya, and Watan, Zambalanka Sakani, Rosen, Nyamton Zom, Yamnesija. And Tela, Tesarka, Memale. Pintoya, Yongodo, Cantana Tendesenata, Captain Kachin, which Talo Namju, Pache Kunsamla, Yondo Tende, that Salakape Magodu, Zabin Panyaman, Sella chokes and penitently, Pacha Tanatan Sijo de Yore, then the taking Nacho Zabin Panyamatela, Matsotanyam Yonan. Katina Tendeka Coca Zambo Yungore, Tenite Ngazotata, the Lanyamzos and the Yamlis Jokawa Zambo, Hajanko Kaviapo Tendeche, Race and Munjinga Tony, Tening also on that of Yamlis Pakajuni, Tata Jam Zabel and Kanga Mamboche, Janatin Yam Teka Kanga, Tenite and Dalik Manchoktan, oh Mogi. Tenin Jungwa can Nubala Supermango, Yong de Yore. They get Samate, Tenin you to Shene, then Zabel ship data, Deji Pusum Suba Yonga, Data, Tenin Tato, Senji, Tamjena, Rambai and the Sanje Compang, Tobiala Suba, Tendoga, Teni, Dembata, Molam, Nan and Yona, Rona, Shayen, Takidele.
Dashidele, everyone. So now we are starting our annual Vajrakilaya Retreat, and thank you all for joining the retreat. First, I would like to say Dashidele to everyone. And so we are holding this retreat every year, but this year everybody is enduring a lot of hardships due to the pandemic, and therefore we are also not able to assemble like we usually do to practice the Vajrakilaya Retreat. So everything happens on the live stream this year. So that's on the one hand, it's like that. On the other hand, actually, now that we are assembling virtually on the live stream, actually, many more people are able to join from all over the world. We can all join together this way, and maybe even more than before, and practice together. So on the other hand, therefore, there's also really a great benefit to that. And so nowadays, during the pandemic, the Eminence Gerchen Rinpoche, especially not this year, has spent most of his time in retreat, and he is coming out of retreat for practices usually on Saturday and Sunday. And now this Saturday, we have the excellent opportunity for Rinpoche to be here with us and to bestow us teachings. So today we are really extremely fortunate to be able to practice together with Rinpoche. So recognize that as a really an incredible opportunity when you engage in practice. And then also as we engage in practice, we should all have this ongoing state of aspiration, thinking about all the suffering in the world, all the difficulties in the world right now, the pandemic and wars, all the violence, famine, harm by the elements, and so on. So we should make our prayers that all of these may be pacified and the world will come to a state of perfect peace and happiness. And that ultimately all sentient beings gradually attain the state of enlightenment. So please make such prayers during the practice. And thank you very much, and Dashi Delek.
Now opening prayers. Mega, you're mute.
Shall we do the Umzi, right? You might have a different prayer book than you. But anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to
Okay, maybe only Tibetan opening prayers.
Oh, okay, only Tibetan. Dele to all the disciples in all the countries. So every year we are practicing Vajrakilaya together. It's been many years that we have practiced Vajrakilaya together, and we have received many instructions, many teachings. And so this has been a long tradition of practice. And it is said that what is more important than the practice itself is how we do the practice. So I'm going to share a few words about the reason why we are practicing Vajrakilaya or also Yamantaka on this ongoing basis.
오, 다사지 내야거서리 다들 치벌 요사리 좀 대로 들로마 가시양 줄라 대로 삼고요리 무엇도 지만의 신바 탐지기 이 동사대에서 실력가리야 보요리 사지라 사이 18되나들이 자와 탐지 실용도 즉 이식을 놈들이 치벌자요 말이 이시가 죽어지는 거 쳐봐래 축근 남카지데 예미정 송 추주 축거라더니 남카나지라더니 타도 우메바 데테레 그다다 라니 속되면 송바나지 강가 죽은 종이 저저 진이가 동네들이 죽었더라 파로와다 처럼와메바 센남카다 예미바레 센남카디 예미바테 강리들은 난 샘내 저거들이 답을가 사강답을 이렇게 하는데 류마 이 섬들은 이쪽이 샘리 샘단 남칸이 체매바 하고 그들이 따라게 이렇게 체매장 들이다던 것으로 소소소소를 제발좀 나기 니조 이렇게는 고대 니조 니 차는 이거 차요래 ela papandre 예리 다다 예미 동적 경험지 그리고 참아지 거기종에 토던 것을 좀 봐. 말을 처분 거는 참배해야 돼. 이 내로 마도를 된 거는 참데. 그래서 장미 봐 좋아서 저 이제 다치와를 앞던 중앙을 가진 저 미성성 토리섬 로토기섬 이 망고 차소와리 내로 마도는
So when we engage in the practice of a deity, there's different deities, and every single one of them possesses the qualities of omniscience, of love, loving compassion, and the power to grant protection. So the deities' qualities are really inconceivable, all the deities. And then this is how it is often explained according to different lineages, also in all the lineages. But then on the ultimate level, ultimately, if we only leave it at that, saying that there's all these deities, then it might happen that some practitioners, some disciples think that, oh, this deity might be better than that deity, or it looks like there's a difference between the deities. And so those who cling to the concrete existence of phenomena, they will see it that way. And therefore, it will be good to understand that point too. So all the deities are wisdom beings. And therefore, it is said, all within the expanse of primordial wisdom, all the Buddhas are one. So actually, ultimately, there is no difference between them at all. Their true nature is primordial wisdom or the Dharmakaya. They have the same essence. Dharmakaya and primordial wisdom are the same. So in the text, it says that primordially, you're indivisible from the space like Dharmakaya. So Dharmakaya is like space. That is, there is no center and no boundary. In the 37 Bodhisattva practices, in the beginning, it says, having realized that phenomena neither come nor go. So that's the nature of dharmata, of the true reality of everything that is without coming and going. And its nature is indivisible from so-called outer space. And then on the inner level, we have our body, speech, and mind. So the body actually is just like this planet. And so we possess body, speech, and mind. And of these, the mind is most important. And the mind is indivisible from space. If you understand that, you have understood the view, the natural state of the mind. So even though we are indivisible from space, we grasp at a difference, a separation. We believe there is a difference, a separation between self and other, samsara and nirvana. So everything is divided into two, and so on. And this is what has created samsara for us. So in the text, it says, primordially, I am indivisible from you, Vajrakumara. We actually are the heart, the mind of the deity, of Vajrakilaya. But then that quote continues, however, even though we are indivisible, I began to wander in samsara. I'm wandering in samsara due to being controlled by ignorance and confusion. It is because we have not recognized the true nature of our mind. And it is just due to that we wander continuously, endlessly in the 6 realms of samsara, taking on various forms, sometimes as large as a mountain or as small as a mustard seed, wandering in the 3 lower realms, in the 3 higher realms, in the 6 realms of samsara, only because we have not realized the nature of the mind.
loktori de segore sosoga dulukso soso sa dulukchi parla 데리 예상을 사치 밤에 와서 탐색은 진고죠. 참아서 가리 정한 게 줘요.
So the different lineages and were transmitted in the Buddhist tradition. Also mainly, of course, that is the precious bodhicitta. But there are then three main lineages called the lineage of the profound view, the lineage of the vast conduct, and the practice blessing lineage. And they all are practiced in the secret mantra, but most importantly, from within all these lineages, and also from within the practice of bodhicitta, on the basis of bodhicitta, the principal lineage is the practice blessing lineage. And so whatever deity we practice, there is no difference between them. And so this is how we should see it. And when we engage in the practice of a deity, it leads to a similar result. But then often what happens, why sometimes also there appear to be differences, is because, for example, in the past, many of the accomplished yogis, the practitioners, sometimes they would practice different deities and then they would engage in competitions, seeing which deity is more powerful, trying to show that their deity is more powerful and so on. There's many stories about that. And so this is when the practice has become more important than the way to practice. So when we do that, then even though we are actually practicing a wisdom deity, there still then seems to be a difference between the deities. And so then when we practice Vajrakilaya, for example, then many differences come about. Patur Rinpoche and Dzogchen Patur Rinpoche also had said that if no one clings to the lineage, then the harm that comes about is that one's mind becomes confused due to holding on to there being a difference, separation between different deities. Then one deity becomes two and three and so forth. And then the mind becomes confused by this great variety when actually they are one and the same. So therefore, what's more important than the practice is the way in which we practice. And in Gar Monastery, for example, the practice of Vajrakilaya and of Yamantaka have been practiced for many generations. Since the old days, for 8 generations now, we are still practicing Vajrakilaya and Yamantaka at the monastery continuously all the time. And also we are engaging in our personal practice of these deities. And so therefore, the practice lineage of blessings has never been interrupted up until the present day. And the practice is carried on and uninterruptedly at Gar Monastery, and also people practice it on their own. And so nowadays, it is good to explain that because there are also many new disciples, beginning practitioners. So we need to know the way in which to engage in practice, the sadhana and so on, and then also practice it on our own. And carrying it on continuously is to sustain the practice lineage of blessings. And it is through this continuum that the power of this practice is generated. And so when we engage in the practice, therefore, do not see a difference between the different deities. Because if you think that they're different deities, then that state of mind is really a state of misconception, a misunderstanding of how it really is. So therefore, when you engage in practice, remember that considering the way to practice, how to practice, is more important than the actual practice itself. So therefore, everyone should understand that there's really no difference between the deities. And it doesn't matter which deity you practice. It's not just this deity. This point is important for any deity practice that you do.
Drulog say drulog, Nanga drulog, Sang drulog, Sang Sang Sam, Davina. Say drulog, Ritila, Nadon, Romo, Chuba, De La Soba, Sali, the Tabji Tamji, Idon, the Tabji, Kadukoma Saji, the three, or the Digiba Saji, the three, Jun, Delani Bakti, or it. Kani the Tamjila. So, Drababo Tamchilla, the Yelling, Drababo Tamchilla, Samara Tomushiko, Yore, Dubjogal, Slata, Drababo, and Jevadi Hako, Yore, Dubjogal Slat is Surit, Drababo Kanza, the Kanrit, then Dubjogal, Slata, Drababo, Kanza, Tadi or Chadi, Yore, Yeli Data, Yemito, Jack Johnson. Gangi Chubai, the same Pinja Titri Chuba Chadi, or some district body, the Saja Garden, district Chuba Charles, the Chubai Button, Yichitan put it in Jeremy. The Latin said the district body, simply carries a summer Java dinner. It got the man, seven Nero, Dodi, the other Sangiris, Matodon Coraris, Tori Yudi Careri, Tori Yudi, Tati. Parade, Chuka, the Tachuku Hakona, Torita, Sena Pata Hako, Mato the Kari, Dada, Daji, Ni, Territory, Lani Subdimina, so by the Dumima, the Dabden, Joe, the Zosaji, GP, and Chonso, that is your Rotam, the G, GP Lodi, Chepakatati Shosomas, GP Law Kangin. GP lot Major Darden Charoda was just going. Daji the Dame Batoni, the Hakwatam, Jackie Hakwa, go Peggy on Mary. Use Daji, the Turpa Chasan, the Jacham, Yore, the Paktan, Topo, Rimji, the song of Jacham, Da, the Chadam, also just in a Chasar. Pass it, you really did the city. Somebody related to that part, Charles one, Jogori, Tilly, Tata Sajet, Kamis or Tosa, or Sanjirambia, Sajet, or Nangore, Tosa, she was the GP Lord Gandhi, Shori, Toshi was somebody and DJ go Yore. Tilly, Tata, Union Kare, Yelling, double simply made by Joy or Mary. Double city goes on, but the top of commission, Sajelis on the social Dandi, there's somebody and gave a Yamatana, the Chago Harizot money. There's some like a flag on Dandi, you and the Tennis, Dandi, so what you know, the doctor over it. Yatanga Jachi, Tinijin, Kotor, Tachi at the Moma Daya, Tinijin, Dirty, the doctor over it. They really just be a darn. Or Jimmy Ryan, Saint Sanji Saint in Yang, Nico Dandi, the George, Hakori, this is Dandi, Mebartang, Dandi, Mebartang, that's saved by J. Lore. Somebody said me about his silver was literally related to Charlie ratio. They Hakori, this day is double to give me a top member to say, don't tell it, the double city shocked our age.
And so what happens if we don't understand that? For example, there were disciples who came to me and said that, no, for example, one of them would say that I've practiced this one deity for a really long time, And I have accumulated millions of mantras, maybe it was 100 million mantras of the deity. But still, I didn't develop any special feeling at all. But then practicing the Yamantaka Drupchen just one single time, a very special feeling arose in me. So actually, there is no difference between the deity. And so this is kind of the doubt that we then develop, thinking that there is this difference between the deities, and that has to be cleared away. But then, so the reason why this feeling arises is not because there is a difference, but because of the way in which one engages in practice, how one practices. And for the way of practice, there are three different ways: the outer, inner, and the secret way to practice. The outer way to practice, the outer practice has to do with playing the instruments like the drums and how to make the offerings and engage in the various shrine activities. So to perform them in a very careful and proper way is the outer way to practice. For example, now the benefits of doing that also comes from the tradition, the lineage of the past masters who have practiced that perfectly, the awareness holders who have engaged in practice, and this is transmitted to us now, and therefore it possesses great power. And so in any case, when we engage in the practice of the Vajrayana, the secret mantra, the practitioners, first of all, must really understand the nature of this practice, really the fundamental point of this practice. And so in order to understand that in the very beginning, first of all, we have to understand what is the relation between the practitioner and the deity that we practice. Who is that deity really? And what about the practitioner? Actually, the deity that we practice and the practitioner are very close. So in the sadhana it says, even though primordially I am indivisible from you, of one single nature. So this one single nature that we share with the deity is our mind, and that is our Buddha nature. The Buddha himself had said, Buddha nature pervades all sentient beings. So based on that, this is how trust, belief first arises within our mind when we understand that point, that on the basis of Buddha nature, we are one with the deity. And so then next one may wonder, so if that's our true nature, then why are sentient beings not awakened? So that is also explained in the Samantabhadra prayer. It says there, not realizing your true nature, you are sentient being wandering in samsara. Realizing it, you are a Buddha. So the quality of knowing the mind is that you realize that there is just one. There's no difference whatsoever. So that is one thing we first need to understand. And this one nature is the space-like nature of the Dharmakaya. And so what happens if we do not see that? If we do not see that, we perceive a self, this me, this me. And then there is self and other. In the 37 Bodhisattva practices, it says, all suffering without exception comes from wishing for one's own happiness. The perfect Buddhas arise from the altruistic mind. So the only difference between us and the Buddhas is that we cling to our self-cherishing attitude, and the Buddhas have given rise to an altruistic mind. That's the only difference that has occurred. And then what is the altruistic mind? If we do not cultivate the altruistic mind, then the ice block of self-grasping will not melt. And we do not realize our true nature, that there is no self, that the mind is empty. So even though we might be very intelligent and know that there is no self, we might understand that the mind is empty, but that on its own is really useless. So the self will still go on, and it has continued on for limitless lifetimes. It is this habitual imprint of perceiving a me, a self. So also the Samantabhadra prayer says, and gradually these tendencies become stronger and thicker. And so the only way to make them melt away, these tendencies, cultivating love and compassion. Every time love and compassion arise in your mind, the ice block of self-grasping is melting. The Buddha himself actually had accumulated merit for 3 endless aeons. And this entire time, the Buddha only strove to benefit sentient beings. So merit is actually nothing else but love and compassion. And it's that merit, the altruistic mind, that has to melt the ice block of self-grasping. And so to remember that this quality, no matter what practice we do, there is no practice that doesn't start with refuge and the motivation of bodhicitta. This is a skillful method that was given to us by the Buddha. It is the method to melt the ice block of self-grasping. Because if we do not do that in the beginning, if that is not the basis of our practice, and if we skip that and go straight to the deity practice, then we will engage in the practice of the deity with a self-grasping mind. And then things will only get worse, because then, as you just mentioned before, the deity practice then is used maybe to compete with others, or it may then also therefore lead to thoughts of anger and jealousy and so forth. So then a lot of negativity is generated due to that, and things will only get worse. So we need to understand the ultimate view. And actually it is said that when you recognize the fundamental basis, there is no more view. So that's the kind of view that needs to be recognized. And so therefore, even though primordially we are indivisible, sentient beings are indivisible from all the Buddhas, temporarily for now, we possess the fault of self-grasping. We need to understand that, and we need to practice to eliminate our self-grasping. And again, the way to do it is to begin with cultivating immeasurable love and compassion. When compassion arises, every time it arises, the ice block of self-grasping is melting. And so therefore, the refuge and the motivation of bodhicitta in the beginning are really indispensable practices. So this is a very important point to understand, and also a practice that you should always make effort in.
강자리 가리지에 되는 배는 당부 호화도를 독서스 등매지 시 대 뉴모바에서 와는 바 시 대 뉴모바다 라줄 무세요 학원이 이 등매지 차로 좋아하는지 셔터바 답이 출라지래 다 나디에 토가 대신에 나디면은 뉴모바도가 셔터바 뉴모바데 마다바 같은 뉴모바나 봐 다부까지 이 시간에 봐. 왜냐면 처럼 더 습기감이 유모받다 처럼 더 사계감이 자주 쳤다고 봐. 하고 이 탑의 서띵송 사계의 띵송은 무슨 때 됐다. 저요가 됐다고 지지나 다다 사계를 잡는 저거 사계 종대인데 그래서 그 메가톤 기가 타라 용토바다 사제들 가든지 가요 선이 계속 그래 이기는 다 중에 사제 용도 하고 그래 따르고 속을 그래서 초하는 거리 서로 초하들 내고 그래 그다 시골에지.
So what is important is that an real feeling arises within you. And that feeling has to arise in the very beginning, when you first take refuge and cultivate the motivation of bodhicitta. So a feeling has to arise in the very beginning. And so what kind of feeling is that in the very beginning when we take refuge first? So in order to really feel that when you take refuge, you first of all must understand the suffering of each of the 6 realms of samsara. And then next you must know that all of this suffering arises from afflictive emotions and then karma. And then you should recognize that all of these afflictive emotions are actually present within my own mind right now. And these are like ice blocks that need to be melted, and they can be melted. And in order to melt them, mainly we have to eliminate self-grasping. Because when there is no self-grasping, then also the 6 afflictive emotions will naturally collapse in themselves. So from an impure perspective now, in an impure state, our mind is afflicted by the 5 afflictive emotions. And in a pure state, these are the 5 wisdoms. So the ice block of sentient beings are the afflictive emotions, and the mind of a Buddha is like a vast ocean. And then who gave us the method to purify our mind? It was the Buddha. So when you recognize that, so you go through this thinking during taking refuge, and then real trust in the Buddha arises, real devotion arises when you take refuge in the Buddha. And then when you see an image of the Buddha's form, the actual form of the Buddha, it even brings tears to your eyes. A real feeling arises, a feeling of gratitude for the Buddha for giving us this method. And so when that arises, when this feeling arises, then you have really understood the actual qualities of the Buddha. So therefore, when you start the practice with taking refuge, it has to be, you have to practice refuge in the beginning with that kind of feeling. So when you take refuge in the very beginning, this feeling must arise.
바로 다다 단디 데려쳐봐 변하다가서 다다 쥐쥐 생시래 선우대적 대요는 낭쥐쥐 생시니 시주의 다 대상만 되셔야지 전대권은 되게 가성지는 요거요 되게 뭐 자기요래 데려쳐서 양다양 따라 강시시는 라비요래 이해는 무엇도 안 남들이야 이 동들이 진이요 성우들이 같이 자체는 종합만을 맞대버렸지. 남편들이 같이 막내들이 다디다 뉴모를 막아라 데레지. 대하 권이 데르티니 성우들이 다 성은 동아치 뭔가들이 영광을 하지. 아마 마다다도 사도를 받았다고 그래도 사실은 데르티니 내가 핀바다 내가 망본 중고 요래 코는 잡아가서 남이 심기가 주를 유망가 요래 유보다 단디는 성화 요래 단디는 성나 단디지 인핑으로 어쩌고 단디지 요다 매다셨다마 다 요다면 하고 요래 인핑으로 어쩌고 단디 요 말했어 단디 요가 인핑으로 어쩌고 요 말했어 대회는 대일이 따뜻한 이 핑을 단디니게 따지고자고 대신은 다 정말 생기 들고 와서는 이 핑을 그때 와서는 슬루루 차는 거라 단디 같이 치나 도보 핑이 파마니나 보고 삼지게 파마되게 저당 사진 강보해서 뭐 다리 정체도 파마를 쓰야 요만 커서 파마를 쓰야 미가 차서 다 이 파마를 삼지 미가 차도 그래 대다도 차니 대다 당디 요거까지 인fin이 로메가 인fin이 요거까지 당디메가 대지가 즉소리 뭐 하고는 인fin으로도 양디 하고는 다 습기이 되니 기직 담지를 소화돼 하고는 지금 다 습기 봐 예, 민수는 남지 습기는 즉디 담지랑이 그들이 이제 망시 사걸 고할지 상하지는 무슨 이해를 타고 차대요 내가 마다바는 이 마다부터 또 당지랑 그 당지는偷的 하고는 들이 다들 들이 퍼바는 들이 또 다서 다 상속 챙겨 퍼바송들 퍼바 이제 상모들 퍼바시가 동지들이 이 퍼바 듣고 말이 상속 챙기지 남과 상제배 내가 사제 망고 사제 다도 사제 답제게 상속 챙기지 봐 적래 오 내가 너네 퍼바 나서를 다 상속 챙기지 봐 주성지 사제 답제게 뭐 같은 거 좋아 인생 이런 게 되고 라고 사제 되고요 대도 책들을 때는 봉지 싸움을 때문에 우리 설을 사족 책을 퍼봐래 나는 좀 사바도 니제래 토만을 부족 사족 책을 대도 싸움을 나는 이치게 와도 되네 그러니까 이거 매년 쓰는 거요 그랬지
So the world consists of this universe. There's the outer universe, and there's the inner sentient beings, the inhabitants of the universe. And so now how the nature of it is actually also explained in the lineage supplication. And actually I've given many teachings on this lineage supplication, and you can read it. I have explained that many times to the best of my abilities. And every time you read one of those words, remember the meaning of it. So now the outer universe, no matter how vast it is, no matter how much there is in the universe, nothing transcends the 5 elements. And then the inner sentient beings within this universe, no matter how many beings there are, none of them transcend self-grasping and the afflictive emotions. They all have that. So that is one thing that we first need to understand in terms of the outer universe and all sentient beings. And so the outer universe, when in a pure state, it is seen that the 5 major elements that make up the outer universe are actually the 5 mothers or the consorts. So that is their, like the female Buddhas are the pure essence of the 5 elements. And then from an impure perspective, we see the elements. We see earth, water, fire, wind, and we see mountains and so forth. We see this entire material world. And then from that perspective, from this ordinary perspective, the elements sometimes are beneficial and sometimes they cause harm. So this is how it is for as long as we wander in samsara. So in samsara, sentient being's mind is filled with the 5 afflictive emotions, and these arise from the self-grasping mind. So first, when you look at your mind, once you have taken refuge, and now next we cultivate the motivation of bodhicitta. Now look at your mind when altruism arises, when real concern for others arises. Look at that mind and try to see, is in that moment, do I grasp at a self or not? So you can clearly see that in a moment where you have an altruistic mind, you do not grasp at the self. And likewise, at a moment where you do grasp at a self, you do not have an altruistic mind. It's impossible for the altruistic mind to arise when the mind is in a self-clinging state. So they are kind of mutually exclusive. They exchange each other. That's one thing to understand. when you begin with the motivation of bodhicitta in the beginning. So look at your mind when altruism arises, even if it is just for one moment. In that moment, your mind is fully relaxed. And then look at the mind, how it is when you cling to this me. For example, it happens all the time between friends or family, parents and their children. For example, the children often only care about their parents' money and their possessions, the house, and they want to own that. And they really don't care so much about their parents. There's not much love for their parents. It's because they are selfish. And when there is self-clinging, there cannot be an altruistic mind. When there is altruism, there is no self-clinging. So that's important to understand. We have to understand how they each of these two states of mind kind of annihilates the other. So it's important to understand this momentary feeling, even if it's just arising for a moment. When altruism arises for a moment, recognize that feeling that comes with the altruistic mind. And that's the beginning of the cultivation of the motivation of bodhicitta. And so then it is said, when you recognize that everything that appears and exists is the form of the deity, then you have mastered the generation stage of the secret mantra. So then when the mind becomes pure, naturally the entire world and all beings are seen as pure as they are, because on the basis, in their fundamental nature, everything is pure. And beings only appear in an impure way temporarily. That's not their true nature. So it's just every time self-grasping arises, it becomes, this layer becomes slightly thicker and thicker. And so therefore, bodhicitta is most important. And in the context of Vajrakilaya, we speak about 4 kilas, 4 purvas. And really most important is the purva of bodhicitta. And that actually is really the ultimate. And it's not just in the context of Vajrakilaya, it's always the case in any Buddhist practice. Bodhicitta is the heart of all the Buddhas of the past, of the present, and of the future. Their mind is a single one in bodhicitta. And so therefore also when you practice Vajrakilaya, you have to recognize that and think that the enlightened mind of all the Buddhas of the 3 times is one within this mind of bodhicitta that you are now giving rise to. And really think of this with certainty, being sure about that. So as you read the text word by word, really reflect on the meaning of what you are reading. So on the outer level, we have to cultivate bodhicitta, the purva of bodhicitta. On the inner level, it is really this feeling of love and compassion that has to arise. So that is what we refer to as cultivating the relative bodhicitta in the beginning, and it has to be developed to the point where you actually really trust in yourself.
다들이 라지 제름을 공심하지 제 공되는 저거 요소리 내가 어머니들이 차창게 요 말했더나 칼라도나 때라 저 상황도 좀들 좋아서도 좋고요 되는데 저 탐지 짜치 보들이 무엇도 다 조절했다 좋았지 제 살인의 개발들이 조절돼요 이제 다 냠처리를 가리들이 냠도 매 마삼 그래서 따라지 따뜻하다 제는데 시합을 직접 시합을 잘 시합이 저 사진 남지 시합다 뭐 정말 갖고 소리 맞아서 저게 드린 직접 시합을 파카고는 직접 살아서는 어떤 직접 시합 저 남이 시합 내서 드린 직접인데 시합이 담이 또 보셔 사진 남지 시합이가 시합 정말 냐들이 있어 갖고 당들이 세일에서 요지 사지 이라고 되는 때도 괜히 이라는 게 뚜껑을 뚫었냐면 해야 다 고갑대리 저들이 무슨들이 대다라는 게 냐면 제가 그렇지 리바도 토야를 다 저들이 나는 그 무엇 다라는 게 냐면 해봐 세요지 때도 차창 좀나 나는 무슨 다라는 게 가지고도 다라는 게 냐면 해줘라 그래서 상하 냠처리 뭐 소동 제리제지 소동 제리제서 이게 다시 많이 왔지도 제고를 제가 디냠서 나나 그래서 다 고갑던 거랑 나는 냠처리들 좋고 요래 이런 아니게 또 사만도 막 빼요래 다 사면냐면 이제 그요래 라야들이 거 타와 토고 라지니가 체배가 동안들이 남년 재미면들이 시티 땅에 되는 냐면 걔네들이 이 바비들이 냐면 걔요 다음에 걔네들이랑 그 참아 냐면 제법까지 잠벌들이 파파 냐면 제법 탐지적 말이지 다 사자나 가래나들이 파파 담을 요래 마사님만 보요래 강리나들이 저기 파파 냐면 제법 탐지적 대민들이 상속성 냐면 제법 잠벌님이 냐면 상속성 냐면 제법 탐지 냐면 요래 뒤도 좋아지는 뒤 가래 페이거든 다소고 말이야 다 스키는 페이고 시스템이 들랑 보면 가만한 면에 들지 냐면 있잖아 들지 속도 세지야지 이들이 다다다 조금만 보소리 양속도 세지 갖고 요래 매만고 요래 다랑 보면 냐면 있잖아 들지 속도 세지 매용 거 요래 소동 세지 등등제 들지 심적으로 마인과 내속도 요래 듣고 가서 다 빼야고 요래
So now, nowadays, people may feel that we are not able to meet together to engage in the Vajrakilaya Drupchen retreat practice. So the people may feel that now it's different. They have to do it on their own. And so when we did it together, when we did the Drupchen together, then maybe, as we mentioned before, people reported that they had this special feeling. And so now that we are not doing it together, maybe people feel that they do not have this special feeling. But actually, so I gave you everything. We went through the whole thing of the practice. According to the practice blessing lineage, we started with all the outer aspects, the ritual activities and offerings and so on, and then the inner practice. So everything was really passed on to you. And so then, therefore, when you engage in the practice on your own, a feeling can still arise if you engage in this practice. So maybe also if you have not paid much attention, you feel that now I'm just doing it whichever way I want, maybe not having all the aspects of the practice complete, then maybe no special feeling would have arisen. But the reason why it arose in the past also is because the entire sadhana was complemented with practices so that, like all the ritual practices, so that everything is complete, that the practice of the practice blessing lineage is really practiced with everything together. And so this is also why the special feeling has arisen. And it's important for all the different elements of the sadhana, that belong to the ritual practice to be really complete. If you just think it doesn't matter so much and it's enough if we don't do this or it's okay if we don't do this or that, then it's incomplete, just like incomplete food or so. So anyways, we have done that when we were together. You have received the sadhana and everything entirely, everything completely, and therefore also a special feeling arose. And so now you have that sadhana, which is very precious. You have the tools, knowing the ritual, different activities of the ritual, and how to engage in the practice. So now, therefore, you don't have to think that, oh, we are not together, it's not the same. So actually, it's even scientific. We have this mind that science, for example, uses, which is our intelligence, our wisdom. Science uses wisdom in a worldly way, but it's still an aspect of wisdom, really. And in essence, it is really the same as the omniscient wisdom of the Buddhas. So it is just a difference between, is it projected facing outward or is it facing inward? Science projects the wisdom awareness outward and focuses on the mundane life. And when we practice, we turn the same wisdom inward and we look at the mind. We realize that there is no self, but it's still one and the same wisdom, the same mind. There's no difference. So nowadays, we can use this wisdom that we all have to engage in practice. You have received the practice. Now you can also follow the practice online, also through a recording, and do it in an authentic way, also on your own. Now, this is really an opportunity to engage, put this into practice on your own too. And the way we have done it before is in essence really the same. So don't think that there is a separation. The same kind of power and the same kind of feeling can still arise. So you bring together at your home when you practice whatever you can of these external materials for the rituals and so on, and you then engage in practice as we have always done. And actually, there is one advantage that you have now, even because in the Vajrayana practice, generally, we speak about 4 nails, kind of that bind the life force. And one of them is actually easier practiced on your own, which is the nail of samadhi, single pointed abiding without distraction. This is actually, now that we are alone, but on our own practicing, this is an excellent opportunity to practice that, to practice undistracted samadhi. And also this is how I myself am practicing. And many of you are engaging in practice in this way. And if you also engage in practice, now since I have passed this practice on to you, I've given it all to you, since if you also then engage in practice, this will also lead to my own liberation, because self and other, you and me, we actually are indivisible. And I personally am engaging in this practice all the time. Day and night, actually, in my room, I have the CD playing, the Vajrakilaya, and all the time, continuously, I engage in the practice. And so just like that, you all can engage in the Vajrakilaya practice. And no matter where you are in the world, all of us practicing Vajrakilaya really become one, become all together. And there may be different cycles of Kilaya, different aspects or practices of Kilaya, and then there is practices of the new and the old tantric systems and so on. No matter which one it is, they are all one and the same, really. And whichever one you practice, our minds will merge into one. So likewise, anyone in the world who practices bodhicitta will be together with all the others who practice bodhicitta. Our minds become one. So that's the feeling that that's the thing that you should feel, that you should recognize. And so when we engage in such practice, what's the benefit? Benefit is that self-grasping goes away. It goes away when you wish to benefit others. So even if you're not on your own at home in your house, engaging in practice, you can still do the practice having the same feeling. And so as you mentioned before, there's those 4 nails that bind the life force. And one of them actually said is very difficult to practice when you are in a group of people. It's actually better to practice it when you are on your own. And that's that nail of samadhi, of single-pointed, undistracted meditation practice. So recognize that really as an excellent opportunity.
네 타마이 체계 되려고 들이대서 이 제대로랑 똑같이랑 들들이 랑 동라야 마도 사람들이 체계도 강요 말이 이 따라서도 따라서 고갑상 모델들이 따보 라는 뜻도 거기들이 되게 인생제 니부제지보다 마포를 봤었더니 나보칼에 코트들이 축축한 코트들이 자서 기바 코트들이 왜서 또도 코트 받을래 들이 니부제지 들이들 도주제지나 아시디 제좀 땡땡제다 니부제 공부제다 도주제 공부제지 받들이다 simply 탐지 simply 노디 초용적 대성들이 스바티지 simply 탐지디 마음이 꾸셨다 그래 마음이 그런들이 고서 답고셔는 사람은 simply 탐지 주라 이제 유목 쪽으로 대 미니들이 시간은 결혼을 그것이 밀사투 그래 그것이 제 사투 말이 미도 마음이 제발이 simply 탐아봐라 찍어요 말이 simply 탐지를 사지지요 그래서 그래도 다양한 게 토탈이 들이 싸우다나 들이라나야 피 들이지나 들이 수많은데 핑거에 뒤고가비 한번 다시 이제 장고래지.
Then there is the nail of samadhi. So the first nail is the nail of samadhi, and so that is the single pointed meditation of the deity. And so now we visualize the deity, and so that actually refers to visualizing the deity. And when we try to visualize the deity, it's difficult to visualize the entire form of the deity with all the elements of the deity, like the body color and the implements and the ornaments and so on. So we might not be able to visualize it all. But then as you read the sadhana that describes the visualization, just as you read each part, in that moment, just one by one, bring that to your mind. Oh, this is how it is, and then the next one, this is how it is, and so on. And then once you're through the visualization, then just let the mind rest in a state without any focus, with focal object, without any concept in the mind. So just rest in the natural state. And so then we visualize only, so from within this natural state, the only visualization then is the mantra string, like the mantra garland at the heart, and you can just visualize it again according to how it is described in the sadhana. But the visualization is very subtle, it's very, very small. So there is this wisdom being just the size of a thumb joint, and then at the heart, it's a golden vajra at the size of barley grain and so on. So just according to the sadhana, and without having to visualize all the other parts. So all the other parts, the entire deity, just think in general that it is all there. So then you're mainly focusing on the mantra string at the heart or the navel. And then slowly, once you visualize those syllables, slowly the mantra string begins to turn. So we go through 4 stages called the 4 branches of approach and accomplishment. So the first stage is the approach stage. And here, as you mentioned before, first you visualize yourself as the Yidam deity, completely clear in your mind, just thinking that I am that, be clear on that. And then you visualize the mantra syllables as like in the form of a string, like a circle, a mantra circle. And when you are able to visualize that clearly, so when all the syllables appear clearly in your mind, the whole mantra circle, then you have accomplished the approach stage. And then you move on to the close approach, where you slowly begin to turn the mantra string, the circle. So first it turns very slowly, and then it accelerates and it turns very fast. And so the measure, how you measure your progress in the practice is not through how many mantras you have accumulated, but the measure is samadhi. How your visualization, how focused and clear your visualization is. That's the measure. Because often people now, they just focus on how many mantras they have accumulated. So the measure is your samadhi, your concentration. And so here in the second step, the close approach, the measure is you're able to visualize clearly how the mantra garland in the end then spins really fast. So when that is accomplished, then you come to step number 3, which is the accomplishment. And here, then once the mantra string turns fast, from the mantra string, then light rays radiate and then gather back. And this is actually all also explained in the consecration of the Purba and the Sadhana. It's more extensive there. And also when you read through the consecration of the Purba and the Sadhana, also during the consecration, think that when you read each of those lines, what is the meaning of those lines? For example, the purpose of the consecration is to purify the minds of sentient beings. So now within the minds of sentient beings, there are the afflictive emotions. These must be purified. Fundamentally, the basis of mind of all beings and my own mind are one. We all are one. And it's only because of self-grasping that sentient beings gave rise to the 6 afflictive emotions. And these are brought under control by primordial awareness. So how the mind matures is through awareness. When awareness arises, the ice block of afflictions melts, and their sentient being's mind matures into primordial awareness. So this is what also happens when we radiate and gather back light rays. And so in that stage, to accomplish the third stage of accomplishment, again and again, visualize it over and over again. And now that we are all at home, this is actually really an excellent opportunity to really train the mind in that focus, in that meditation. And so in this context here, the consecration of the Purba and the Sadhana is also very important. And also because it is so important, I've added this consecration to the sadhana, because originally it was not part of that sadhana, but it's very important. So now it is added to the sadhana. And so as you read through the consecration, think about each of the sections carefully. For example, one day you could think about one section and think about this part over and over again, and then the next one the next day, and so on. And also in your break times when you're resting, bring up this visualization in your mind over and over again. So not just when you're actually sitting down with your sadhana, but any other time as well. So now is really our opportunity to train the mind in the visualization really well. That is what we need to do at this time. And so then in the end, when you have really trained the mind in such a focus, then it will become very clear in your mind. As you read the sadhana, every instant you read the next word, you recognize this is how it is, this is how it is. And you recognize it with certainty. There is like a resolution in your mind and knowing that this is how it is. And it is this point where you feel certain that blessings will enter your mind. And so that's the purpose of the Purba consecration or the blessing. And of course, there are many more things to be said about that, but we spoke about that before. And also, actually, if you understand the purple consecration is also actually will be of benefit for any other sadhana practice, meaning the understanding of the meaning of the purple consecration. So the meaning again is that in the minds of sentient beings are the seeds of the 6 realms of samsara, the 6 afflictive emotions. And these seeds are present in my own mind. And they need to be melted, dissolved with bodhicitta. So this feeling should arise when you go through the consecration. And it is through this feeling then that really trust in the Buddha's teachings will arise within you. So with this understanding, you should engage in practice. And so to the practice, there is always an outer, inner, and a secret aspect. And feelings that arise within that practice. And so in the beginning, it might be a bit complicated because there are all these offering substances or these items that are used and such representing the sense, the 5 sense powers, for example, or the 5 sense objects, form, sound, and so on. So it might be a bit complex, but as you go and train the mind in the sadhana over and over again, the complexity actually of it also is really what kind of enchants your mind. It is what also brings kind of attracts your mind. So it brings your mind under control. And so it begins with bodhicitta on the inner level, the relative and the ultimate bodhicitta. This is really what brings the mind under control. So it begins with the relative bodhicitta, and a real feeling has to arise, a feeling of love, of immeasurable love. And when there is love, then there is no thought of a self. So this is what must certainly arise in the beginning. Because when that arises, then on the basis of that, you will develop the confidence, the trust that comes from the practice then. So if that doesn't arise in the beginning, this is precisely why people ask questions that we mentioned before, is because they lack that foundation. And if you lack that foundation, no matter how many mantras you recite, it will not be of much benefit. And that is why then often people say that they have lost all their trust in the deity. It just doesn't work for them. And that is because they lack that foundation, and the trust is broken because due to the lack of foundation, their negativities in their mind, that the negative state of mind and their obscurations become thicker. So they lose their trust. But the thing with that is that for the deity, it doesn't harm the deity if you lose your trust. It is really your own loss if you lose your trust. And so therefore, recognize this time really as an excellent opportunity to engage in practice, to train your mind in that single pointedness of visualizing the deity and having the deity clearly in your mind. So that's the nail of samadhi. And then there is the approach nail of approach, which relates to this mantra circle, mantra string. In the approach stage, we have said first, so once we have visualized that clearly, it begins to turn first slowly and then very fast. And then when it's very fast, it naturally emits sound. And then from that, then light rays radiate and gather back. And that's actually then the third nail, the light rays radiating and gathering back. And then the fourth nail is the nail of meditation. And so it is said that through meditation, sentient beings will accomplish the Vajrakilaya through maturing their mind, which is just like the maturing of a fruit. When the fruit, like an apple, is immature or unripe, you can't eat it. But it doesn't mean it's not edible. So this unripe state is the state of the 6 afflictive emotions. And when the minds of beings then matures, the afflictions turn into the 5 wisdoms. And that is like a ripened apple that can be eaten. So the difference is just between being mature or immature is the only difference. But in reality, in their fundamental nature, no real ordinary sentient being actually exists. They all are connected to the mental continuum of all the Buddhas. So therefore, regard them all with such a pure perception. That will be to your own greatest benefit, and it will also bring benefit to others. So again, recognize this time as an excellent opportunity to practice, to train your mind.
Take a break, 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Rinpoche said, take a break 15 minutes in Chinese.
Om Ahom.
So we spoke about the nail of samadhi, and that is to have the deity appear in your mind single-pointedly, and that should be also carried into your daily life, in all your activities, not just in the practice. In whatever you do, moment by moment, in an instant, you should be able to remember the Yidam deity. So in this way, the practice stays with you through your mindfulness, your heedfulness. So to represent mindfulness, there is the deity. The deity becomes your mindfulness. Or in the context of practicing devotion, that is when your mindfulness becomes the guru. The essence is the same. It's the same mindfulness. So in whatever you do, whether you're eating food, walking around, sitting, standing, lying down, in any moment, remember the deity and the mantra of the deity. Therefore, it's also very beneficial to play the mantra sound on a loop. Then you always hear the mantra. Whenever you hear the mantra, you remember the deity. So what's important is that you have an ability to remember the deity in any moment. So it can come up instantly. So for example, that's important when you encounter a dangerous situation. You should then be able to remember the deity right away. So that's the samadhi. And so important is that when you engage in the actual practice, you are meditating on the mantra circle single-pointedly. And that also is really the life or the heart of the deity. And then you always sustain that. You never forget about it. It never leaves your mind. That's samadhi. It's just like a mother never forgets about her child. So then you should also be able to remember the deity, to have the deity in your mind all the time in your daily activities. So not just during your practice.
신바 이제 강내들아 당보한 전국 가서는 일본 봐. 대대에서 거기서 내와니 봐도 들이서 조고라고 차고요. 하자 조고 거기서 사장시 시로고 사장시 예매 봐지. 사장시 예매 봐도 지지서 이바데 지지 님바 예와니 봐도 봐도 지지. 지금이 가려야 되는데 민망고 소방고 제 말이 쉽지 참치들이 대식인 보여 봐 대탐들 소소들 사숙생들 참고를 다시 좀 좁더지 초드제를 가려야지는 근데 무슨 좋아요들이 다 사바체미 받을 쉽지 참치 동물의 동네지 그 동네지 다 뒤지 가려야 뒤들이 쉽지 동네 람저지나 동네지 맞듯이 사바체 요리 들이 사바체 어제들이 저 세트들이 삼바들이 쉽지가 나대는 싶고요. 쉽지 나대는 데이터 법은 관리리 법화선하고 관리들이 감수를 차 쉽지 탑지가 소위 시소광 거지는 다음에 뭐 거기서 담보 거기서 사촉수 예다오는 다음에 봐도 소위 시들이 다음에 봐도 동돌아들이 동담 사촉수는 민고요래 이 미래들이 미발시 받고 다음에 봤던 걸 다들 장롱도 봐도 쇼거래 장롱 쇼들이 쳐랑지 에시를 문이 사바 초왔지 거래 들 가지는 못고 사바 세미를 같이 버려 상는 이다다 디미 봐가 오 세비 삼제 뜻과 성상대도지 아주 맞아 버리면 문이들이 세부 삼을 빼려서 답을 등에다 나오나 잡을 문이 사바진 잡을 랭데가 동나래에서 지동에 소를 다시 잡고 그래 이 차블들이 삼바지도 되게 그래서 다지시 그래 삼바님 맞아 버리 이 대에다가 생오마를 듣지않지 아따다 이거만 드바카리 양지 카리 이핑으로 사촉센터 카리 사촉센터 삼바 세미 무슨들이라게 보다 충만한 지들이 쉽지 탑지에 동해에 서로 사바무스 jel지 초알레 잠빌리 동해 다타는 실 마치바 차게 지실지 유미래 이 찹다 마차랑 서로 딱지 간 거래 왜그니 참지들이 팽이요에 가이게 잡고요 되는데 가이게 피기요는 쉽지 샘들 항상 치발이 요 말이 보다 보니 쉽지 샘들 항상 치발이 베네디 파마탄게 다도 좀 째도 또 남들라서 지지송 거기서 말이 쉽지 샘들 항상 제치게 받아 하고는 이거도 내가 들린 작성자고 차도 나지고 대신에 제랑 사바체담체라 대사부터 이 고속을 다지 시험에 무슨 무슨 민이 잡고 요래 이 동다 무슨 신 오다 문이 팽도 사 이런 거 검도 연구요래 방생오마가 득장 이 생오마를 들 삼바다 진짜 제담제네 이 생오마는 추바 퍼지데 이 다들 심지 사제 담전이 추분 초도 좀 와도 삼바다 진짜에 애들이 생오마는 대바 뺄 생오마는 추바 퍼지나 심지 진우 이제 빵 진비 이제 진비 진우 이제 빵 사제 담제 데려가고 이들 집이 집에 좀 때가 사속스럽게 좋았다 사제 탐지 추분 초도 좀 와들이 심지 피바도 봐 삼바다 이제 지와 이 사제 탐지 추분 초도 좀 와들 이 매들이 왔다 사제들이 셀로 바탕 판단 사제 샤르드 바탐도 말했지 쉽지 때문에 이게 차가게 되는 이 사제들 하다 이바요레스 이 가르치는 요래들 주를 상이제 제나 주랑게 다지 셰비 주랑 타블랑아 레병 거리 사제가 쉽지들을 마치고 받아서 째아요래 쉽지 때로 돼서 약고 차타블 사제를 강력하요 말이 되나 얘들이 쉽지 핀받아 대화도 받대 사제 추발해 저들들이 조랑 탑지들이 이제는 이제 방집이 이제 그 사바들 이제들이 배치 봐요 조바들 저들 사제가 조바 사제님 좀 유명치 좀 들이 차들이 조랑 탑지라 대다로 삼모들이 어제 쪽들이 생고만은 조바퍼가 생고만을 좀 받자마서 이 생고만을 대받잖아요 대받이 치라더니 Dini control teba teba te chuba yang cha ro yo. Dini sanji sunap de ron jo yo le. Tu senji sam de jin chuba cho taba te le. Dini sanji nin chu ta. Rang de dong ta. Ta ta te senji. Ma du me che ba som de la cor de se. Ma cor de la cor de la cor de dini ta 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 ti ni de blessing with Nevada Jerry or it.
So that was the nail of samadhi, and then there is the nail of approach. And so we said that before we have to visualize the mantra garland very clearly. And once it is clear, then it begins to turn. So first it turns very slowly, and then it accelerates and it turns very fast. And when it turns very fast, then light rays radiate from it and gather back. So at this point, it is so fast that you do not visually perceive it, but there's a sound which is just like the engine of an airplane. And when you're able to visualize that, actually that is the same as visualizing the entire form of the deity. So then there is the nail of radiating light rays and gathering them back. So we continue to focus single-pointedly. And in fact, this term nail, actually, nail in general has to do with single-pointedness. So when you are like nailing something to a wall, then it stays there and it remains unmoving. So that's why it is nail, like you're kind of nailed down in your mind in a way you're fully concentrated without any distraction. So when you meditate with full concentration, then the deity will not leave your mind. It stays in your mind. And so then we come to the light rays radiating and gathering back. And so when you, so it's the mantra in leaving in the form of light. And so first there is the approach, then the close approach, the accomplishment, and the great accomplishment, right? So first in the accomplishment again, in the approach, there is the mantra string, then it begins to turn. So then when it begins to turn, at this point in the close approach, the deity is like becoming your friend. You are becoming quite close to the deity. And then it accelerates and it gets faster and faster. And then you move through the accomplishment, and then you come to the great accomplishment, which is the Drupchen. And here then in the great accomplishment, your mind completely merges with the mind of the deity. So that's Drupchen or great accomplishment. So therefore, Drupchen or great accomplishment does not just mean that many people are practicing together in an assembly, but it means that you recognize that your mind is the deity's mind, and that all sentient beings possess that mind. They all possess Buddha nature. And to recognize that is why in the previous step, in the accomplishment, we radiate light rays. It's in order to recognize that. Because those light rays that you send out in the accomplishment stage are the light rays of bodhicitta. So it's bodhicitta that pervades all sentient beings. And since all beings are one with your own mind, there is nothing that pervades and nothing that's pervaded, because we are all one mind. And so during the sending out of light rays step, a real feeling should arise too. And that's the feeling of immeasurable love that is sent out and then made to pervade all sentient beings. And then as it pervades all sentient beings, you should think that bring to mind all the suffering of sentient beings, the suffering of samsara. Bring that to mind in an instant. And I think that these light rays of love clear away all of their karmic imprints, all of their suffering, and they become completely pervaded by love. So that is what happens kind of on the outer level. You visualize how these light rays of love go out there. And then this love, your bodhicitta, has the power to destroy all the self-grasping in the minds of sentient beings. And that is when the blessings of Vajrakilaya really have arisen. It is when you pervade all sentient beings, all the three realms of samsara. And so then everything becomes purified and is kind of brought under control. And all beings become free of self-grasping. Their minds become infused with bodhicitta. And then finally, they realize the ultimate truth, which is emptiness, that there is no self. So they mature into that state gradually. In order to mature into this state, we have to eliminate self-grasping, like melting an ice block. And if you pervade beings with love, then it will naturally melt. So therefore, it's very important to give rise to this actual feeling of love when you're sending out the light rays. And so that's the feeling, and the visualization is that you think the light rays pervade all beings and purifies their obscurations. But then you shouldn't just think that, so now I'm sending out the light rays and now everything is purified. So that's just kind of an imagination. But you actually should have a feeling of all of that. Really bring to mind all of the suffering in the world, like it is now, for example. So really feel that suffering that they have and that feeling of suffering, and then pervade that with love and think it is all cleared away by bodhicitta, which is like the sun shining, clearing away all of their self-grasping. So this is how we purify the obscurations of like the lower fields, which are the sentient beings. And it's really self-grasping that's cleared away. And it's cleared away by the altruistic mind of bodhicitta. So altruism really is that. It is bodhicitta. It is immeasurable love. For example, the love that you have for your children or your spouse. Is that feeling of love that has to arise for all sentient beings. And that clears away their suffering, because the reason why they suffer is because they lack love. They lack loving kindness. And so since the minds are all connected, there is no reason not to pervade them with love. So if you send out love, since our minds are one, you can pervade them with your love. And therefore, you bring real benefit to them. So the benefit comes from understanding that sentient beings and my own mind, on the ultimate level, in reality, we are really one and the same. There is no separation. Jigten Songkran also had said that I'm a yogin who has realized that all the sentient beings in the 6 realms are my parents. So, which are one with me, that those sentient beings are one with me. So your own mind and sentient beings' mind are one fundamentally. This is what you need to understand. And these sentient beings are only temporarily obscured by self-grasping, which is like ice. And the greater your love for them, the more their self-grasping will melt. And also know that they can mature. If you know that, then you will be confident I can actually benefit them. And so then in your meditation, then you will actually really feel inspired to do the meditation, to do practice. Because then through the meditation, you are continuously purifying the obscurations of sentient beings. And simultaneously, you're making offerings to the higher beings, the Buddhas and so on. In fact, the most supreme offering you can make to the Buddhas is to give rise to love and compassion for sentient beings. It is to abandon harming sentient beings entirely and to benefit them as much as you can. That is what really pleases the Buddhas. This is the real offering to the Buddhas, is when you engage in bodhisattva activities with an altruistic mind. For example, it is said that if you want to make an offering to a Buddha, and if you offer them like a mountain of gold, the Buddha will not even smile at that. But if you just give rise to a little bit of compassion for one sentient being, the Buddha will be so happy. And that is because all the Buddha wants, because when you give rise to love and compassion, then also your own self-grasping diminishes, and you are on your path to liberation. And that is what the Buddhas want. The Buddhas love all beings like a mother loves her only child. So if the child turns out a little bit happy, one sentient being is made a little bit happy, that's the greatest joy to the Buddhas. Because the Buddhas themselves don't really need any of our offerings because they don't have any suffering. What they really want is us to cultivate love and compassion and to engage in activities that bring about the benefit and happiness of sentient beings. So that's the best offering you can make to the Buddhas. So therefore, the best offering is in all your activities, your daily life, and whatever you do, you should cultivate an altruistic mind and give up harming others completely and accomplish the benefit of others completely with mindfulness, with awareness, with love, with patience, continuously and uninterruptedly in all of your activities. So this is the best offering you could make to the Buddha. And so now when we practice in the meditation and we visualize the light rays radiating and gathering back, that accomplishes 3 continuations, which is that you purify the obscurations of sentient beings continuously, and you make offerings to the Buddhas continuously, and you attain siddhis yourself, accomplishment yourself continuously. So when you make offerings to the Buddhas, those light rays of love become light rays of devotion and trust. So therefore, devotion of faith in the 3 jewels, therefore also is an offering. And the essence is the same, is love. The essence is love. The same love that you have for sentient beings. So, for example, this prayer wheel on the outer level externally, it is a prayer wheel. But then through this prayer wheel, actually through the mantra string, the mantra circle, actually the power of deity practice is accomplished, the power of approach, accomplishment, and enlightened activities.
Jimbaga Jevore, Chubaka Jevore, Cherab Tabjir Sunan Puzzle Topa, Nekam Toriga Development to Pimba Orme, Dungni Ranga Tara Tawalet, like a sim tagolity, just not to Simon Javali Gore, Dandi Shakore, that's a Sadandi Shakore, non Dandi, Sapata, Niger, Tishakore. Simply so culturally, Tangi, many similar there is all simply at the garden chibu chasom, some happen, that meeting immediate over the haku. Oh, simply just a immediate about jessos. Ah, so simply the garden chibu, son. That young man like a pamachi, that anti, not the immediate, not really immediate also. So you talk by the career, somebody immediate, simply somebody immediate. They give top day. Sörayang yormay. Bitti tapdetleri sokuyoruz. Hangi şey sokuyoruz? Sadece lejim deşe koyun belki nasıl şey di lamdetini, diletini da tabi piyumuda de bu yemek lejim de so hakı olsun. Demin namya tavayoda dağdi macı namya tavameba. 이걸로 싸우었다는 이 집들이 진짜 대박 해봐도는 이 새끼 서라는 아래 책도만 잘사시해 주는 선로 판다 당에 책도 랍송 온가들 노선지에서 노선에서 라라도 하고 테스트를 제시 봐요 차어버리 제름들 뒤에 그리고 저 도저히 뒤에 동문에 양천하는 이러고는 좀 차적을 양천하는 이 뭐들로 자 체들에 제가 배웠대요 동에 단위 제도 봐 대화를 신방해봐 도리게 대화 스스로 대화 자주세 봐시니 된지 가는 데지 가세요나 저제를 맞다 말이 나한테 잡으리나 강인들이 능이 참지 싸워 하고 요래 너도 지체에 받던 요리지 랍치보다 더 보면 하고 말면 지체를 지체에 와요 말이 르마이도 따로 와서 이체를 하고 말이 simply double 동네를 싸움보다는 semno so 하되게 뭐 차야 되도 동네 요래 대도 싸움들이 동네를 시나 들이 코아들 타로 들이니 담 들이 코아를 타고도 나디를 타고도 나디를 타는 유모바를 타도 유모바를 타고도 유모바를 타고도 나디를 타고도 이 하고를 다 깨를 뛰는 제지를 뛰는 별거 저 처럼 가서 소도 되는 나도 되는 나서 뭐 요래 되는 그때 봐도 무슨 되는 토야로 하고 이니 진짜면이다 그냥 타발이 라기 돈이 따르게레스 헬티레트리다 하고 그 콜로제기 소동제기 뭐 빠져라 가래게 이제 콜로데랑 콜로자를 세죠래 사지 님추 주면체 오 소가로도 많이 맞지 제제 매봐 되나고 사타 매봐네 simply 탑들 피마도 대화 듣고 요치 이 디바스가 산제 탑지 니가 요치 뭐 대를 생고만 대바지 생고만 니게 지와 되게 따라가 당디데 딱 매봐 모셔와도 저도 삼나 들이 들이 세부터 제사 삼선 지로 들랑 코르들 지고는데 들이 랑코르 피용을 때 자리오래 들 산지 님주 주미체스 제 매바 차와보가는 예래 생고만 주바레스 생고만 습지 두종 주미체스 라코까지 열었지 요래 생고는 라코는 니바 들 라코 세부지라 됐다 그래야지 다른 것도 주미체스 다들 지섬지들이 다다다들 상하를 나오시면 예르비나 이제 리바드지 가면 마벌스들이 어떤 자리 송고요래 대회들이 다다디 라코랑 하고 있는데 어찌 뭐 요래 저 심지어 내면서 라코를 뜻이지 양피바게 양라코 가고를 대바지 핀주로 되는 돈도 세마인 거 죽을라 등등 제시 봐도 sem 네바들 나도 네바를 용지 무슨 좁아요 셈스러로 용하는 좀 무슨 좁아요 예소들 저기서 무슨 말에 덕탁 가래는 라카세만 너는 셈나무 제시 네바탑 데르데르 사바다는 이제 탑들이다 테스트하고 선거요에다 소돔 저지를 못 받았다. 되게 랑콜을 좋아요 봐. 그때 다다 가서 가는 나버서 우리 제보 세지 다 되어서 욕처럼 랑콜 용대 가래 주체에 봐 욕처럼 랑산 좋아하는 세면 좋아요. 주체에 욕처럼 보면 또 허리제기나 비용치 벌어. 사람들은 막 같이 있고 그래. 어디 비용치 벌이게 얘네들이 소속들이 랑콜다 이렇게 내가 첨보요리 요 나님의 제백가리서는 랑콜에서 마사지 이렇게 나지 top 지치 여고요리 변나 데이터 상으로 딴 거에 돼 심을 좋아도 해버리 때문에 못 봤어 그렇지나 야 마부지의 비용을 다다다다는 그만 좀 갖고요 했지.
So now when you are listening to the teachings, one step by step, you think, you understand, and you think that, yes, this is how it is, and that's how it is. So you understand what is being said. So you feel that now I know it. So that's good, but that alone is also of not much benefit. It's good to know it, but also it is said we have to experience and we have to realize. So we have to understand the experience and realize. So when we practice, this can be applied to anything, but now in the context of visualizing how the light rays radiate out and gather back in that step. So we have said here, we think that when the light rays radiate out, it makes an offering to all the Buddhas, so it pleases all the Buddhas. And then you think, and now it's purifying the obscurations of all sentient beings. So as you practice that, you understand what is going on, that you're making offerings, that you're purifying obscurations. But as I mentioned before, what is it that the Buddhas really want? What is it that really pleases them, the best offering? So it is that you benefit sentient beings, that a feeling arises in you. So with your body, for example, it means to not cause any harm toward any sentient being, even if you just abandon a single thing that harms others, even if you just do one thing that helps sentient beings. This is what makes the Buddhas happy, and this is what they want when you make offerings. So this is how you should understand it when you are making offerings to the Buddhas. So with your body, therefore, understanding that, you would think that now, wanting to make offerings to the Buddhas, I am going to benefit beings. I'm not going to harm others. I'm going to benefit others. This is what really will please the Buddhas. And actually, when you do that, when you refrain from harming others, who really benefits the most from that? It's actually your own greatest benefit. And if you harm others, who are you really harming? You're really harming yourself. So therefore, you're really doing yourself a great service too, the greatest service, when you are making offerings to the Buddhas. It's actually your own greatest benefit. So mainly in order to bring joy to the Buddhas, make offerings to the Buddhas, that's important. Because sometimes people might think that, oh, I'm going to make a 1,000-fold Namgyalma offering to the Guru, or I'm going to make so many offerings to the Buddhas. And of course, that's also good. Mainly, that's an act of generosity, which will lead to results. It's an act of making offerings that will lead to results in future lifetimes. You will have perfect merit, and you will experience the happiness of the higher realms temporarily. But actually, what is really to be accomplished, what we really have to accomplish, is to become liberated. And to become liberated, you have to liberate your mind. And the mind can only become liberated through bodhicitta, through destroying self-grasping. And self-grasping is only destroyed if you cultivate love and compassion, if you cultivate bodhicitta. So that is, for this reason, this is the best offering that you can make to the Buddhas. So if you see a very small little animal, for example, a little sentient being, and you feel compassion for them, you really feel love for them, this is actually something you should actually recognize that actually, even though I feel compassion for this being, actually this being has been very kind to me. It is because of this being that I'm able to understand compassion, that I am able to cultivate compassion. So rather than me being kind to that being, the being really has been kind to me because now I have found compassion. This being also has been my parent in previous lives. And now we meet again, and it helped me to cultivate compassion. Now I have compassion. And if there's anything that we need to gain from our practice, then it is that. It is love and compassion for sentient beings. And now, who has that method to do it? No one really actually knows how to really do that. So it's the Buddha who gave us the way to do it, the way to cultivate love. And he began his teachings with showing us the path by teaching on karma, cause and effect, and the suffering nature of samsara, and the past and future lives and so forth. So he taught us how to attain liberation. And when we understand that very clearly, for example, if you understand very clearly what is wrong, what is a negativity in the mind, then you will be able to give it up. And this is crucial to understand, because if you don't understand that, you will never free yourself of self-grasping. And no matter what you do, if you do not free yourself of self-grasping, you will never become free from samsara. So when you think in this way, then faith and trust arises. Trust in karma arises. And then you will be very mindful of your conduct. For example, if something slips out of your mouth and you say something harsh to someone or you gossip, then immediately you would recognize that and you would feel very sad about it. You would know that this was terrible of me. Why was I so unkind to that person? Or you think, oh, I've had a negative thought about somebody else in my mind. This is really harming myself. So be mindful and conscientious about those things. And you will be if you understand those teachings that the Buddha had given. And so now in the context of the deity yoga, where we visualize the light rays, sending out the light rays and gathering them back, if you really practice with a focused mind, let's say for a week, you will see a difference. Your mind will, your mind will become so much more relaxed. So even in this life, it helps you. In this life, when your mind is more relaxed, then you will be more happy, and also you will be able to tolerate the difficulties, the suffering that you face in this life. And also you will not become so attached to pleasure, to blissful experiences in this life. Like it is said, the happiness of this life is like a dewdrop on the tip of a blade of grass. Everything is impermanent. Everything compounded is impermanent. So no matter how blissful it might be, it always turns into suffering. So when you understand that, you will not be so attached. Or, for example, you will understand suffering in the world. Like now, suffering is very obvious. Everyone is aware of the suffering that's happening in the world. But the truth is that actually there is always suffering, not just now. So nothing more has happened now. It's just that when we are not in the face of it in such a direct and kind of huge way like we are now, we normally are not we don't notice that there is suffering like that all the time. It's just right now we are actually directly facing a lot of suffering. And actually that suffering is always there. So also when you understand karma, this is what will come to your mind, that there's actually this ongoing state of suffering. So when you understand the suffering of samsara, then you will really develop a wish to emerge from it, to become free from birth in samsara. And the only way to do that, as we said, is to free yourself of self-grasping, to free yourself of the afflictive emotions. So in order to become free of the afflictive emotions, you have to become free of self-grasping. And so therefore, the sadhana, when you understand that and practice the sadhana, the Vajrakilaya sadhana on the basis of this understanding, it really can lead to liberation in a single lifetime, in a single body. So each of these lines contained in the sadhana really point to a very profound meaning and purify the habitual imprints of samsaric life, ordinary life. So through the sadhana, you practice the twofold bodhicitta, and that is really the power, the driving force that leads to such accomplishment as you go through the different stages, the section of the sadhana, the visualization and the radiating out of light rays and gathering them back and so on, and those 4 nails that bind the life force, which actually can be applied to any practice. Just now in this context, I have applied them to the visualization of the mantra garland and the light rays sending out and gathering them back. So in this context, this is how you explain those 4 nails. And in this context of sending out light rays, so then once you understand that I'm really sending out offerings, I'm making continuous offerings to all the Buddhas, and I'm continuously gaining siddhis, and I'm continuously purifying the obscurations of sentient beings. I'm continuously benefiting sentient beings. And this is what the Buddhas want. This is what makes them happy. And this is my expression of devotion, of faith to them. It is my compassion for sentient beings. If you give rise to compassion, then not only do you benefit sentient beings, but also your own self-grasping will melt away just like morning frost in the sun. And so sometimes in our daily activities, we forget about it. And that's why it's good to have a little prayer wheel that you can turn, and that you can actually apply the same teaching of the 4 nails and so on also to that. It's because then you always remember. Sometimes we forget, but if you pick up the prayer wheel, you remember it again. Then again, you remember that through spinning the prayer wheel, I make continuous offerings to all the Buddhas, which fall down like rain falling down. And I'm purifying the obscurations of all sentient beings by spinning the prayer wheel. So that is an immense benefit. So of course, there is first the benefit of physically with your body turning the wheel. But most importantly is that you are focused in your mind. You are remembering the practice in your mind, the purification of beings and the offerings to the Buddhas and so forth. And this is how the power of deity practice then is generated. So it is generated through the mantra circle that is turning, and through it always remaining in your mind. Actually, the prayer wheel, the physical prayer wheel and the mantra string, they have a strong connection to each other. They perform really the same benefit. So since we are not able to always sustain mindfulness, it's good to have a prayer wheel, because when you pick up the prayer wheel, you will also remember the mantra garland, the mantra string, and how it goes out and benefits beings. So this is how the prayer wheel and the mantra garland kind of help one another. So in brief, the point is that the thing that is accomplished is that the mind becomes free of distraction. And that's most important, to sustain samadhi, a state of samadhi that is single-pointed. And in this way, your practice will bear the fruits of perfect qualities. So it is said that when the mind is concentrated and faces inward, perfect qualities arise. Jigten Sumgön actually said that. And then he also said, when the mind is distracted outward, then perfect faults arise. Also only faults arise from that. So these instructions really apply to any sadhana practice, any deity practice. Whatever you practice, what's most important is that your mind is turned inward and focused single-pointedly, and that it is based on a mind of immeasurable love and compassion. If you practice in this way, then the results of those 4 nails that bind the life force will be brought about. And so therefore also it's good in your daily activities to spin a prayer wheel so that you sustain this ongoing state of practice. And so nowadays, actually, many people produce those prayer wheels in the world, but sometimes they make them really large and then made out of gold and heavy materials. And then it's a little bit difficult to turn them all the time. Of course, there are still a great benefit. When you turn them, it's still a great benefit, but you really want to have something that you can turn at any time. A small, lightweight prayer wheel. Because in this way, the prayer wheel and the practice, your mind are always connected. So that's very meaningful. So there's a great benefit in always spinning a prayer wheel. And again, the prayer wheel is connected to the mantra garland, which is connected to your single-pointed abiding in your mind. So therefore, now when you don't practice in this way, sometimes you forget about the practice. And if it's always in your mind, even if you're not in meditation session, if you spin a prayer wheel, then you will suddenly remember. You will remember the 4 branches of approach and accomplishment and those 4 nails, especially the nail of samadhi. And so a real feeling, an experience will be sustained, and that's really essential. So therefore, it is a great benefit to do this practice on an ongoing basis, and also in future lifetimes, it will be of great benefit. So if we just practice sometimes and the mind is not always focused, then if we spin the prayer wheel sometimes, but the mind is kind of disconnected, there's just some kind of like awareness of this is how it is, like an imagination, then it is possible. Of course, there will be benefit throughout different lifetimes, but it might be more difficult to really bring some real results or benefits right in this lifetime.
나리 속되면서 지식이 기회님이 총성에서 관시지 봐봐. 이때부터 정말들이 가대를 깨르는 마음을 조람 탑재 대송 같으니 대리 지시들은 시락되는데 유모가 계속 하고 연당 마야 하고 대리 유모가 하고나 지시라는 총성 유모가지 식 탑니다. 들이다 초대들 말이 들이 대로 참아 참고요래. 데리터다 제시지거든 도지존은 대래 도지존은 삼체 초대적 바테레 이 카보도잖아 대들인 게 지금 봐 가지좀 나들이 대래 도지존은 이거 참아 참고요 그랬지 그 관시지 바테레.
So now I have said a lot of things, and if you think that this is a little bit difficult to understand, then it is enough to just remember one thing. And that's said in the 37 practices, where it says that this kind of soldier or this being of mindfulness always wields the weapon of mindfulness, which is like the antidote, as an antidote. And so this weapon of mindfulness is the wisdom, awareness, purba, or kilaya. If you only hold on to that, everything is included in that actually. And hold on to it at all times, throughout all of your activities, when you engage in practice and when you go about your daily activities, at all times, remember that, remember the deity or remember the mantra. Actually, everything is included within this mindfulness. If you're always mindful, you will recognize whether or not you are afflicted, whether or not you are distracted. And therefore, mindfulness has the power to destroy your afflictions. And if that is accomplished, that's actually the best. That's the most important. And everything is included within that, actually. The essence of mantra and the generation stage and so on, it's all really included within mindfulness. So this kind of soldier of mindfulness, this being of mindfulness, really is Vajrakumara, Vajrakilaya. Mindfulness is the supreme practice of Vajrakilaya. So if you think that that was a lot of information and maybe a bit difficult, just sustain mindfulness continuously, day and night. If you're always mindful, all the qualities of Vajrakilaya are complete within that state of clear mindfulness. And that mindfulness also is the wisdom, awareness, purba. The 84,000 afflictive emotions are destroyed by a single kila, a single purba. Tashidele to all the Dharma friends, and Lama Thupten Nyima will lead us in the dedication prayers.
Okay, maybe we do short dedication prayers, only Tibetan.
Just as I was so happy to see you all, my Dharma friends. So happy, be happy and have long lives.
Long life praying. 22. Yellow prayer book. yin re zhen wan den zhen jiang zu ye xia bei zhen de guan zhou zhen de xiao jia zhen ge ye dan ban zhen jian bei re dan ye ji gun zhan jiu ban zhong zhen zhen le jiu guan zhe jie zhen le xia de su guan zhou zhen jie dan ye zhe gong bei den ba zhen la da da ra du jian de dan bei jie jie xie zi na wa ye ye ge wu jian jiu ge ya de zu ba bei ya na er ya de wa ye so zhen ge re jie re zi zhen jie den guan bei du zhe jie den ba ba den ge re jie ge zhen ge jie den bia jian de ba chong zhe xie zai gen zai gen jie 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 dan zhen ne la wa dan zhe gong ba ren qian ba jie dan ba zhen de ba ye de zhen gong zhen jie jie wan bei da ge la ya sa wan bei li mong bei wan bei da ge la ya sa wan bei li ba hong bei wan bei da ge la sa wan bei li ba hong bei wan bei da ge la ya wan bei li ba hong bei da ji de le
有没有什么要说的 ，Carolyn？Okay, thank you. See you afternoon.
哎呦，上啊吼，那么水的，那么水的。